Hello everyone, this is Austin Woodward, and today we're going to talk about some of the environmental issues and policy managements of the Zanzibar Archipelago. So we're going to begin by opening up with some of these terms here. Forgive me if these seem somewhat self-explanatory. First of which is our environmental issues, which are, of course, the harmful effects of human activity on the biophysical environment. This is everything from the holes that we dig, to the cars that we drive, to the things that we dump into our water supply. If it involves humans and the environment, then it's typically an issue. And of course, environmental policies. These are actions and principles designed to address problems arising from the human impact on the environment. We should be thankful that we have some of those policies. So what exactly is Zanzibar? It is an archipelago, meaning several islands, located off the east coast of Tanzania, and the two islands we're going to pay attention to in particular are Unguja and Pemba, which are the main islands in the region, mostly because they're the most populated. So Unguja is the largest island, has just under 1 million people living on it, and its primary industries include tourism, fishing, and various forms of agriculture. Pemba is referred to as the Green Island because of its verdant nature and how wonderful its soil is. It's just a little bit smaller than Unguja, and it only has 500,000 people living on it. Again, its main industries are farming and fishing. And here's what those two islands look like. Unguja, of course, and Pemba. Pemba is located slightly to the northeast of Unguja, and these regions are actually fairly small. Unguja is only about 1,600 square kilometers, and Pemba is only about 1,000 square kilometers, so really both of these places could easily fit in some states here in the US. So why are we interested in both of these regions? Well, they have a pretty great amount of biodiversity. We see here a giant fruit bat, which is absolutely necessary for a lot of the island's pollination for fruits and vegetables. Have some colobus monkeys here. There are actually several different variants of the species, and a beautiful bird of some sort. I'm not sure what it's called, but there are lots and lots of birds on the island. And of course, both regions are incredibly verdant. They have lots of low-resolution forests and flowering plants. Of particular interest, though, are the marine reserves off both of the island's coasts. Whale sharks inhabit the regions, and he's not about to eat those fish. He's a filter feeder. Of course, sea turtles as well, and the most interesting part are the coral reefs that are located off of both islands. They're considered some of the most verdant and rich in the world, and that's also why they're so worth protecting. So we wouldn't be interested in this topic if there weren't some humans involved in this human-environment interaction. So this is an image of Stone Town, which is the capital city of Unguja, and in turn it's sort of the capital of Zanzibar as a whole. And we see here some people doing some seaweed farming. Of course, here's some of that growing agricultural industry, some fishermen, and a man who seems to have caught a swordfish of some sort. He's a very good fisherman. Now, the meat of it, the environmental issues involving Zanzibar. Deforestation, shifting cultivation, a loss of freshwater species, soil erosion, exploitation of marine resources, urban desertification, and a growing mining industry are some of the prevailing problems they'll have to deal with in the future. For deforestation, both of the islands are absolutely covered in trees, but wood is the cheapest fuel source available for the citizens, and their settlements are growing so rapidly that the government can't do much about it, so about 1,000 hectares per year are being cleared to build homes, wood for fires, and all sorts of things regarding that. There's also this growing cash crop industry, so a lot of land is being cleared for that, and land is also being cleared for subsistence farming. So you'll find that these people are planting bananas and potatoes and that sort of thing just to feed themselves, and that's a problem as well, because all these areas that have good dense forest cover are usually the best soil for growing crops, so you can see where the competition arises. There was an issue in the 70s and the 80s caused by a bunch of rice farmers using pesticides to keep bugs off of their crops. And what this led to was an incredible drop-off in the freshwater species of Zanzibar. The populations are so low now that they're having extreme difficulty recovering from habitat loss, because as climate continues to change and the sea levels rise, there's a shifting coastline in Zanzibar. And so now you'll find a bunch of ocean water that was encroaching upon once protected freshwater sources, and the freshwater species simply can't compete with this changing environment. Soil erosion is also a primary issue. There's an extreme amount of precipitation, and this goes hand in hand with that deforestation, and so what this leads to is massive amounts of soil leaving the island and ending up in the ocean. So one of the biggest issues that faces both Unguja and Pemba are the exploitation of marine resources. Several marine species are overfished as local delicacies. One in particular I can think of are octopi in the region. The people absolutely love them, and there was a time whenever they were almost fished to extinction in the region. They were almost driven completely away. Not to say that the species would have gone, but they wouldn't have been at Zanzibar anymore. Mollusks and shellfish are also under severe threat from overfishing, mostly because these isolated villages use lime made from their shells to help build their homes. It's almost as cheap as cutting down trees, so they pull a lot of shellfish out for that purpose. Urban desertification is what happens whenever there are little to no trees in a region. They didn't exactly plan their settlement growth, so any person who wanted to slap down a resort or a new home could pretty much just cut the trees down, pour the concrete, and get going. And what this leads to are an extreme lack of trees in the region, afforestation, and the cities are now basically referred to as heat islands. You can find anywhere from a 10 to 20 degree difference in the cities as opposed to the surrounding forest regions. And of course the mining industry. Limestone and sand mining are the only other cheap alternatives apart from wood and the aforementioned seashell method. And so this contributes to deforestation. Hundreds of hectares are being consumed by the growing industry, and really calling it industry is a bit of a disservice, because it's not like you've got a bunch of mining moguls going here to take advantage of Zanzibar. It's more so the people who live in the region. If you have a limestone deposit behind your house and you can use it to make a home, why wouldn't you? And the government hasn't really stepped up to combat this yet. And so, of course, we're here to talk about not only the human impact on the environment, but some of the things they're doing about it. We have to be a little bit hopeful. Their government is largely aware of these environmental issues. They have an entire dissertation that talks about them, and they're trying to factor these into some of their future plans. And some of these plans include marine sanctuaries, public outreach programs to reduce this rampant deforestation, and responsible land use plans so that this growing agriculture industry doesn't sweep the entire island. But at the moment, all of these are just plans. So what exactly is happening now? Is there some good to come for this scenario? Well, yes. There have been some very successful outreach programs, both by the government and scientific agencies, to try and curb some local superstitions regarding witches and giant fruit bats. Some of the locals in Pemba in particular believed that the fruit bats were messengers of witches, coming to spy on them, and so they would hunt them when they saw them. This was really bad because the fruit bats are almost completely necessary for all of the fruit pollination and vegetable pollination on the islands. So once the people became aware of this relationship, the species made an incredible comeback before it was almost nearly extinct. I mentioned earlier octopi, how that was a local delicacy, and they were almost in danger of being completely driven away but a government mandate limited their fishing to 1 day out of each month, and the people of both Unguja and Pemba have been largely compliant regarding this, because they don't want their octopi to go away totally, and the populations have made a full recovery. Probably the best thing was some local efforts to educate fishermen in responsible fishing techniques, and this has led to less coral destruction. Whereas before they were using these small yield nets that were, pretty cheap to get a hold of but broke very easily, they would just sort of throw them into the ocean once they were done with them, and these would settle on the coral and, in effect, suffocate it. So now that they're not using that same netting technique, they're finding that, less coral is dying, and this is in turn yielding higher catches for their fish because there's a larger habitat for them to reside. So what exactly does the future hold for Zanzibar? Well, it's identified as a small island developing state by the United Nations, and it's also identified as being one of the regions most vulnerable to climate change, in particular because of the rising sea levels associated with it. The Union Parliament and the House of Representatives of Tanzania both joke that Zanzibar might vanish in the next 50 years. So this is something else that the country is going to have to consider. In conclusion, we identified several problem areas, some of which are being addressed, and some of which are simply planned for. They definitely want to work towards a more sustainable solution for their environment, because they understand that this is their home, and if they completely destroy it, they won't have it anymore. So they're trying to be responsible. But as the climate continues to change, they'll be extremely hard-pressed to develop in all of these areas they're interested in, considering that within the next 100 years or so, the sea is set to completely consume them. We may not have a Zanzibar sometime in the future. Anywho, those are my sources that I use. Thank you all very much for listening. Not sure if we covered everything that was 100% necessary, but still, thank you all the same, and hope you have a wonderful day.